Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Cassie. Today I have some cards for you today using some Simon Hurley products. We're going to be using this Watercolor Blooms stamp set. I want to focus on this stamp set. I want to make 3 cards just using this background because it's such a cool background. I love how innovative it really is. Not only is it a background, but it has little pieces that you can take out and you have like a whole stamp set all its own. And I also want to use some sentiments from this Dudes 2 stamp. I love this stamp. Can't wait to use it. And I'll probably do like a 3 cards, 1 stamp set with this as well. But yeah, today we're going to focus mostly on that Watercolor Blooms background because it's just incredible and I love it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our stamping. I am going to pull out my Misty and we're going to put our stamp inside of the Misty. I thought I would go ahead and try to take my cardstock, which is the Stark White cardstock by Simon Hurley, and I thought I would pull out, all the foam pad and everything from my Misty because this is a red rubber foam. Close the door backwards, and then I thought I would stamp it that way, but then I knew I wanted to stamp it twice, so I thought let's go ahead and try and do some reposition with it. I don't have any tape runner, so I thought this would be the best option. This is the Tombow Mono Multi, and it's multi because it can be used 2 ways. If you let it dry completely, it is basically repositionable. So I tried to do my best to let it dry completely, and I probably should have let it dry a little bit longer. It doesn't affect the card any, but it was on there pretty good. All right, I'm going to take my magic powder bag and run that all over my cardstock, which I did cut down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it'll be a little bit smaller than an A2 size card. And I'm inking up my stamp with some embossing ink. Any clear sticky ink would work. That's good for embossing. And then I'll close the door of my Misty, and then I'll push down and make sure that I have that good and stamped. It's hard to tell with a clear embossing ink when you're doing it on white because, you can't really see it very well. That's why I wanted to make sure and stamp it twice. And Max is very enthralled with all of this. All right, this is where you'll see it kind of stuck down pretty well. It doesn't tear the paper. It's fine. Everything works out fine, but I should have waited a little bit longer for that stuff to dry. I'm going to cover this with some gold embossing powder. This is by Brutus Monroe. It's called the Gilded embossing powder. And then I'll just cover that completely, and I'm getting a little concerned because Max is very into that, and he has been known to run off with a coffee filter or 2. So I'm trying to make sure that his little mouth doesn't grab that and run off and then make a giant mess with all that embossing powder. All right, once we're done with that, we're going to heat set all of our powder, and it'll turn nice and smooth and shiny once you get it heat set. And that's the magic of embossing powder, and I could sit and emboss all day long. I love embossing powders. All right, that repositionable tape or glue on the back works well because I am going to do some ink blending. So I got a twofer out of that. I'm using some of the Simon Hurley inks. This is called Piggyback. This is one of the new ones, and it's so pretty and soft and light. And as you can tell, I'm kind of doing emboss resist, so that's why I embossed it first. And now we are going to come in with our next color, which is Rosy Cheeks. These 3 colors that I've grabbed match so nicely together, and they blend so beautifully and seamlessly. You get this beautiful ombre, which is so cool. And then I'll blend those out a little bit better at the bottom. And then I'm going to come in with Triple Berry, which is another awesome color. And I'll do that at the top, and as I'm as I'm ink blending with this, I'm like, I want to do the whole background with that. So I am going to bring that down just a little bit further because I'm kind of obsessed with some Triple Berry. And then I'll bring my Rosy Cheeks down a little bit more as well. And then we're going to move on to stamping just with one of the stamps from that background stamp. Isn't that so cool? You can pull out a stamp from that, which is why I was like, we have to make 3 cards with this, just doing some different things. All right, so I pulled out the one stamp. I'm going to emboss on the inside. So this is the inside of our card. This is some more Simon Hurley Stark White cardstock. I inked that up with some clear embossing ink, and then I'm going to cover that again with that Gilded embossing powder. And then I'll just take my paintbrush and wipe away any excess powder that I don't want there. And then I'm going to heat that till that is smooth and melted, and we're going to do a little bit more ink blending. As I've said before, I'm really enjoying doing the inside of my cards now. I feel like I haven't completed the card almost if I haven't done something on the inside. That's how I'm starting to feel. So I'm leaving about, I want 3/4 of an inch on each side, and I'm just using some Post-it tape to kind of mask that off, and I'm lining it up on my grid mat to make sure that I have about 3/4 of an inch. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to do the same thing on the inside that we did on the outside, which is do the ink blending using our Piggyback, Rosy Cheeks, and our Triple Berry. And then the big reveal comes, and that's where the magic happens when you peel away the Post-it tape, and you are left with this beautiful ombre border on both sides. I think it's so cool. All right, so now we're going to stamp our sentiment for this first card, and we have some black cardstock, and we are going to ink this up with some more of that embossing ink, but this time I want to emboss it in some white embossing powder, and this is the Alabaster by Brutus Monroe. So I want to make sure that I have white with that. I thought that would stand out really, really nicely. You could do it with the gold if you wanted, but I just really wanted this to stand out and pop with that white background that I'm going to have. So I'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then when I'm happy with that, we'll pull out our guillotine trimmer and we'll trim down our sentiments until we have those to look the way that we want those to look. And so it's easy to line that up inside there and then just trim those each down until we're happy. All right, I did pull out some fun foam, and you know, to be honest with you, I don't know if it's more cost effective to use fun foam or foam tape. I haven't quite sat and done the math on that one. Something tells me fun foam is cheaper, but I'm not sure. So I'm just lining that up using some liquid glue to adhere that to the back. I will say that the fun foam, I think, makes the cards a little thicker. So I don't know how that affects going through the mail, but it does make them a little thicker. And then we're just going to use that liquid glue to adhere our sentiment down to the front as well. I wanted that background to really be the star of the show. As a final bit of embellishment, I'm going to grab some Nouveau drops in the color Morning Dew, so it's clear. It won't show up clear as I'm putting it out. It's going to be really cloudy, but you will see in the pictures afterwards that it's nice and clear. And I just love that ombre background with that gorgeous Watercolor Blooms stamp set. Isn't that beautiful? It's a background, but golly, it's so pretty. For the next card, we're going to put that stamp back in the MISTI. I'm going to take some more of that stark white cardstock and score that at 4 1/4 inches, so it will be a side folding A2 size card. And I had cut that down to 5 1/2 inches by 8 1/2 inches. So, all right, now we're going to put it in the MISTI, and I'm going to do like I did before, except this time I'm not using the repositionable glue or tape. And I'm going to ink this up with some Woof ink. You'll just want to make sure you ink that up really nicely so you get good coverage. And I love this stamp because it has just like this different feel to it. It's like a different texture. And when I say texture, I mean the way it stamps. It's, my husband looked at it and he was like, oh, how'd you get it to do that? And I was like, no, that's just the stamp. It's almost like it's not pixelated or something like that, but it's just different. It's so cool. All right, I'm going to put another piece of cardstock into my MISTI, and this time I'm only going to stamp one of the images, that same flower that I used the last time. I'm going to ink up the top part with some Remember Me ink, and then I will wipe away any of the excess ink that I have anywhere. And then I'm just going to stamp down the top of the flower, and then I'll clean off my stamp. Not great, because it really doesn't matter, but I will just clean it off a little bit, and then I'm going to use some later Gator on the stem. Kind of getting my head in there, take a look at where I'm stamping. And then I'll close the door of the MISTI once again, and then we've got 2 tones to our stamp. It's perfect. And then I'm going to fussy cut that out, which is really pretty simple. And in order to fussy cut, the way I do it is I just hold my scissors pretty much, you know, right where they are, and I move the image around. Pretty easy to fussy cut. And then I've decided at this point I want to add some of that woof to the edges of my cardstock. It just kind of softens those edges a little bit, and it's not quite so stark white, which is nice because my focus I want to be on my blue flower. I'm going to stamp down just another rectangle of cardstock. That'll be my backing for my flower, and then I will ink up the edges of that one with some of that woof ink as well, so everything ties together. So we still have some of that white, but it's going to be kind of softened. And then I'm going to stamp out my sentiments, which once again, those come from the Dudes 2 stamp set. And then I'll do like I did before. I will use my magic powder bag on some black cardstock, ink this up with some clear embossing ink, and then cover that with some white embossing powder, and then heat set that till that is smooth and melted and trim those out. Now I want to do something on the inside, so what I'm doing is I'm stamping up just a portion of the side of the stamp. I'm going to take my mini ink blending tool and soften the edges, and then I'm going to just stick my stamp right on top of that and rub it. And it gives a really cool effect. It's kind of a faded out look. So I'll clean that off pretty well, and then I will do it on the other side so that I have both of those borders ending up having the same kind of stamp. So it's really cool, and it's just an easy way to finish off the inside of your card. And that's all I'm going to do to the inside. I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of my rectangle because I want this to be popped up since the rest of the card is pretty flat. And then I'll even put some foam tape on my flower, and then I'll peel off all the release paper, and I'll stick down my rectangle more to the upper left-hand side. And then I'll peel off the release paper of my flower, and I'll pop that down too as well. I decided not to pop up the sentiments. All I'm going to do with those is just use a little bit of liquid glue. They are going to stick off of the side of my rectangle just a little bit, but it won't affect anything. They're mostly on the rectangle. And then once I'm done with that, that's going to finish off card number 2. So here's another idea, just using that background with a few sentiments. Our third and final card that we're going to be making today using the Watercolor Blooms stamp set, I've just pulled out another one of the images that you can pop out of this background. I'm going to ink it up two-tone. I'm doing the stem with some GRRR ink and the upper part with some Woof ink. So our petals are gray. I know that seems funny. And our lower part is brown. It'll make more sense when you see the sentiment that I choose. But I'm going to go ahead and stamp this across the front part of my card base. This is going to be a very simple card, really. So just going all the way across, kind of staggering those flowers up and down. They're overlapping a little bit. And I don't even mind that the GRRR ink is kind of getting on the petal a little bit. That's okay with me. It doesn't matter, and it's not really going to contaminate my ink pad at all. So I'm happy with that. And then I'm also going to go ahead and flip it over and do the inside the exact same way. I'm just going to do those petals all across the bottom. I just thought that that would be a fun way to finish off the inside. Just doing that entire bottom portion of our card base. But before I get to our sentiment, I do want to do some splatter. In order to do this, I want to make sure my card lays flat, so I'm taking a little bit of washi tape rolled up, and I'm going to stick that inside the card to make sure that I don't get any splatter on the inside. I'm going to take some Distress paint in the color Black Soot, put that on one of my stamping blocks, take a tiny paintbrush, and splatter that all over my background. I just thought that added a little touch to it, just kind of fun, and just a little something extra. And then I have to let that kind of dry. So this is where I'm going to move on to my sentiment, and I love it. This one comes from the Dudes 2 stamp set. And I'm going to do like I did with all the other sentiments, the exact same way, taking some more of that black cardstock, a magic powder bag, ink up my sentiment with some embossing ink, and then cover that with embossing powder. And I love it. It says, "You're so darn old." I thought that worked perfectly with my flowers. So I'm going to take a circle die, and we're going to cut that out. And I do apologize, but my camera ends up dying. But it's easy. All I did was put some foam tape on the back, and we stuck that on the front, and I stamped Happy Birthday on the inside, and that will finish off our third and final card. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 cards I made today, just focusing mostly on that Watercolor Blooms background. You can have a lot of options with this because it's not just a background. It has little stamps that you can pull out of it, and you can do fun things with it. But those are just 3 ideas. So I would love to know what you think. Go ahead and leave those comments down in the comments section down below. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I will see you very soon in the next video. So thank you so much for stopping by.